Hey guys, I'm Matthew.
And I'm Chloe.
Welcome to our TED Talk.
Today I'll be talking about nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication is the best language of all time since we can all understand it and communicate with gestures and our attitudes on a daily basis. We don't live in a completely silent world, as silence is a boundary within a world that is polluted by noises. This is a kind of boundary that people try and break, as many of us constantly live with verbal communication and noises to help us understand each other. Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, "What you do speaks so loudly that I cannot hear what you say." With this, he hints at what we do is what we call body language. In many instances, such as touring a foreign country, we constantly have to use our hands to speak for us in the form of gestures because of the verbal language barrier. Beyond that, we often need to use facial expressions so that the language barrier doesn't get in the way of getting our points across and building silence. Another instance might be getting a really bad sore throat to the point where speaking just isn't an option because of the intense pain. Therefore, you would need to use nonverbal communication skills to go about the day. You see, our movements often show our way of being and our ways of feeling. The first and most important technical aspect of nonverbal communication is your look, or your gaze. Crazy. Just by looking at the intensity of one's gaze, and even the dilation of their eyes, you can determine whether someone is attracted to someone or not. You can also use this to tell if someone is a dominant person, as dominant people tend to look at things for less time, but they're always the last to move their gaze to something else. Then we have gestures. Gestures mainly concern movement of hands and feet. There are some that have been outdated after commonly being used in a different era, such as hand kissing, as it is rare to see someone do it now. Another thing about gestures is that they're also commonly linked to cultural context that may sometimes lead to misunderstandings. Posture is key with nonverbal communication, as dominant people tend to stand straight and have a confident walk, as others may stand and try not to be noticed as much. Clothing is another factor, as people always judge based on one's clothing, no matter how hard you try. A person can often speak through their clothes with color coding, such as wearing black to a funeral, while wearing bright pink wouldn't be respectful in that sense, and it is important to be aware of it. Lastly, we have corporal contact. It's the fastest type of nonverbal communication. It's when distance between objects is abolished, as there can be many occasions for when this happens, such as aggressive behavior, affectionate relations, in cure in hospitals, and in interaction. All of these help us to understand and adapt to specific situations around one another in the sense of nonverbal communication. Now for the 4 functions of nonverbal communication. The first one is expressive communication, as it shows your moods and feelings, and it's the reason emojis were created in the first place, in order to show how you're feeling when we can't type it. We also have interpersonal communication, which just shows hostility, friendship, anger, fear, confusion. It's also hugging and holding hands with those you care about. Then we have interaction adjustment, and it's keeping body language under control, as it can also be a way to show someone it's their turn to be playing a board game when someone needs to roll the dice. Also, by looking at someone's hesitation and blinking patterns, you can help you tell when they're nervous, when they're under pressure. You see, there are several kinds of ways to tell how someone is feeling or what their mood is by paying attention to the way they communicate without any words at all. By also using such nonverbal communication skills ourselves, it is much easier to understand one another on a daily basis.
So today I'll be discussing gender and culture effects in expressing our emotions. The question is, how have these gender differences been explained? Gender differences in emotion have generally been accounted for in terms of the social and cultural context, especially as a result of gender stereotypic socialization. Emotions can be considered part of the socialization into roles that men and women conditionally occupy. Traditionally, in Western industrial societies, women are more likely to have domestic and nurturing roles, in which taking care of someone emotionally is their main task. Men, however, are more likely than women to provide the material resources and assume a role in the paid economy. Moreover, these roles suggest differences in power and status, with female roles providing less power and status than male roles. To perform these social roles successfully, distinct emotions and expressions are required, whereas men report experiencing more anger and other hostile emotions. This gender-specific pattern is more evident with they experience and express emotions in different ways. To date, many studies on gender differences in emotion have been conducted to answer this question. All research has generally concluded that there are many inconsistencies in the findings resulting from methodological problems, yet a gender-specific pattern in emotional responding can be found. Women generally experience more sadness, fear, shame, and guilt. We must distinguish between powerful emotions that display one's power and assertiveness, such as anger and contempt, and powerless emotions that imply internal blame, vulnerability, and obscenity to cope with negative events, such as sadness, fear, shame, and guilt. A high status male role aimed at competition, autonomy, and power would reinforce powerful emotions, but discourage powerless emotions, whereas the female role would discourage powerful emotions and encourage powerless emotions. Because there is a need to serve and maintain harmony in social relations with a minimum of overt hostility. As in other areas of social behavior, alternative explanations have been proposed to account for some of these gender differences in emotion based on the biological differences between men and women. For example, hormonal influences would explain the more frequent crying behavior of women. Gender differences and the interaction between physical attributes may place constraints on the social behavior that accompanies these social roles. Applying this perspective to gender differences in emotions should vary as a result of the cross-cultural variability in gender roles, if they are primarily determined by the social roles men and women occupy. However, if emotional reactions are primarily determined by biological influences, a more uniform pattern across countries would emerge.
Thanks for watching our TED Talk. Just by looking at
Grace, you have to cut this one.
Just by looking at No, we don't. No, we don't.
We're not leaving this in.
To the point where speaking just isn't an option. Why are you laughing?
So today I'll be discussing gender and culture effects in expressing our emotions. The question is, I'm sorry.
Matthew.
Whereas a man, wait, I can't read it. Okay.
Where are you?
I got it. Okay, ready? Fear.
And it is important to be aware of it.
Are you kidding me?
It's fine. We'll just. Are you joking? Hello. Thank you.
Next.